Today, we're going to dive into the teachings of a Roman Stoic you've probably never heard of, but trust me, his wisdom is startlingly relevant. His name is Musonius Rufus. He was this incredibly practical philosopher who lived through exile and all kinds of political chaos, all while teaching one core idea: how to build an unshakable core of happiness, no matter what life decides to throw at you.
So let's just kick things off with a massive question. What if everything we're told to chase, the money, the promotions, even just being comfortable, has almost nothing to do with real, lasting happiness? What if the key was something you already have, something that nobody can ever take away from you? That's the radical idea Musonius Rufus puts on the table.
Musonius has this incredible analogy of an acrobat. Just think about it for a second. People endure these unbelievable risks, this grueling training, often for a tiny paycheck or a few seconds of applause. And then he flips the question back on us. If they're willing to go through all of that for so little, why are we so afraid to endure a little hardship for the greatest prize imaginable, a truly happy and meaningful life?
To really get his answer, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll meet the man himself, this forgotten Stoic of Rome. Then, we're going to explore his idea of the soul as a fortress. After that, we'll get into his surprisingly modern views on equality. We'll also see why he believed happiness is basically a team sport. And finally, we'll pull it all together with how you can actually put his philosophy into practice.
So who was this guy anyway? Musonius Rufus was a huge deal in first-century Rome. Sometimes they even called him the Socrates of Rome. And he was no armchair philosopher. He was a hands-on teacher. His students were everyone from the slave, who became the great philosopher Epictetus, all the way to powerful Roman nobles. He was even exiled, twice, for his principles, which just goes to show he didn't just talk the talk. He lived this stuff, even when it cost him pretty much everything.
For Musonius, philosophy wasn't about winning clever arguments or memorizing quotes. As you can see here, it was incredibly straightforward. Figure out the right thing to do, and then go do it. The action, the deed, that was the whole point. Theory without practice, completely useless. And that leads us right into his first major teaching, this idea of building your soul into an impenetrable fortress. Look, life is always going to throw storms your way. That's a guarantee. The real question isn't how to avoid the storms, but how to build a shelter inside yourself that can withstand anything. The secret to building that fortress is learning to tell the difference between what seems good and what is good. On the left here, you've got the apparent goods, things like pleasure, wealth, comfort. You can think of this as the social media highlight reel, right? The fancy vacations, the promotions, all the stuff, we chase it, but it's all external, and it can vanish in a second. But on the right, you have the true goods, your ability to reason, your sense of justice, your self-control. These are internal. They're the only things you truly have power over, and, for Musonius, the only real source of happiness.
And this isn't just a mental game. It requires actual training. Musonius laid out a two-part workout plan. First, you train the soul by itself. This is all about constantly questioning your gut reactions. Is losing that job really the end of the world, or is it just an obstacle? Is this cheap thrill really a good thing? Second, you train the soul and the body together. And this is where it gets real. He'd say, intentionally take a cold shower, skip a meal every now and then, sleep on the floor one night. Now the point isn't to punish yourself, is to prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort, that you don't need constant pleasure to be okay. You're building your resilience muscle.
All right, now for one of the most revolutionary parts of his entire philosophy, something that made him a total outlier in the ancient world, his absolute belief in gender equality.
He tackled this question head-on, at a time when asking it was almost crazy. For pretty much every Roman, the answer was a hard no. But Musonius saw it completely differently, and his reasoning was pure Stoic logic.
His core argument was just so simple and elegant. He said, look, men and women were both given the power of reason by nature. They have the same senses, the same basic body parts, and the same innate ability to be good people. So if the hardware is the same, why on earth should the software, their education, be any different?
And then he breaks it down using the 4 cardinal virtues. Men need wisdom and justice to be good citizens, right? Well, he says women need them to manage a household and be a good partner. Do men need courage to face hardship? Of course. And so do women. And self-control? He was adamant that this applied equally, totally rejecting the sexual double standard of his time. So while he saw that they might have different roles in society, he insisted that the fundamental virtues needed to be great in those roles were exactly the same.
This leads us to another area where Musonius just shatters the stereotype of the cold, detached Stoic. For him, philosophy was never about retreating from the world. In fact, he believed a good life was fundamentally a shared life, one built on deep relationships and a sense of duty to each other. Musonius saw marriage not as some business deal for property or making heirs, but as a true partnership grounded in perfect affection and mutual love. And this wasn't about some fleeting passion. It was about a deep, shared promise to support each other through absolutely everything, the good and the bad.
And he took this idea of partnership all the way. The ideal marriage, for him, was a complete union where you hold nothing back. You share your body, your inner life, your very soul, and all your stuff. The goal is to help each other become better, more virtuous people. It's like a shared project of becoming the best versions of yourselves together. And this sense of connection doesn't just stop at the family. Musonius taught that virtue isn't some abstract thing you keep to yourself. It naturally expresses itself as care for other people. To be a good person is to be concerned for the welfare of your neighbor. This is the social side of Stoicism. We're all part of one big human community, and our own happiness is tangled up with the well-being of everyone else.
Okay, so after going through all these powerful ideas, how do we actually bring them into our own lives, right now? What are the key takeaways from this forgotten Roman teacher? Let's boil it all down.
First, and this is maybe the biggest one, practice is king. Reading about being a good person just isn't enough. You have to actively train your character every single day. Second, choose your hardships wisely. Endure difficulties not for money or fame, but for the sake of becoming a stronger, better person. Third, be relentless about focusing on what you can control, your thoughts, your actions, your character, and learn to let go of what you can't. And finally, always remember that the good life is lived with and for other people, built on real affection and a duty to our community.
And that brings us right back to that acrobat. We all endure hardship for something, for a career, for a goal, for a relationship. Musonius Rufus forces us to ask a simple but profound question that really defines our lives. Are the things you're struggling for actually worth the struggle? What hardship are you willing to endure for the sake of a truly good life?